Welcome to On the Way, a podcast about life. But not just any life, it's about life with Jesus. Why do people follow Jesus, and how do they get started? And what difference does following Jesus make in their lives? Before Christians had a name, they were known as people of the way, people who followed Jesus' teachings. People have been on the way for nearly 2,000 years now. During the podcast, we explore the ways that people become followers of Jesus and why, and what difference following Jesus makes in their lives. On the Way is produced by the Baptist Standard, a donor-supported provider of news, opinion, and resources for living like Jesus. I'm Eric Black, editor of the Baptist Standard. I'm glad you're with us today. We have with us again Emily Jones, and if you missed her first interview, we hope you'll go back and listen to that. During that interview, we had a lot of questions that we didn't get to talk about. So, Emily, thank you for being with us again today to answer some more questions. And just for those who are not familiar with Emily Jones, she is a sportscaster for the Texas Rangers, and we'll let her say more about that if she wants to. But thank you for being with us again. We appreciate it.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So one of the questions that we talked a little bit about, but we didn't really dive into it just because of time, is the work-life balance. And so one of the questions that I had that came up for me is, who modeled work-life balance for you? You had to learn that somewhere.
I didn't. No one.
Okay.
No one. I mean, I learned by doing. I really didn't have that. You know, my father raised my sister and I growing up, and from the time I was in the fourth grade on. And so, you know, whether we want to admit it or not, in the vast majority of cases, the woman in the relationship is the mom is usually the one that's juggling the stuff at home, the child care, the meals, the sports schedules, all those things. And so, it's not, that's kind of a little, you get, I don't know, it's not very, you have to be careful of saying that, because you don't want to say dads don't do anything. This coming from a woman who was raised by her father. So I'm not saying it's that way in all cases, but in most cases, that is the way it is. And so being raised by my dad, he was working full time. So I guess he did set an example for me of that, that work-life balance. But it wasn't something that I saw from a female perspective, I guess. And so for me, when I got married, I still pretty much did everything the same as I did before I got married, as far as my work was concerned. But once I started having kids, my priorities shifted, things changed, and I had to figure out how to manage that in order to be present as a mother while also continuing the passion that I had for my career. Yeah. So it's just something that I just kind of, figured out. And it was early on, it was difficult working a crazy schedule. I mean, if you pay attention, not many sports are played Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. They're all at night and they're all on the weekends. And so once I had children, especially after I had my second one, I kind of reevaluated how much time, physical time, I wanted to put into my work and being away from home, and that shifted. And so I left Fox Sports Southwest, and that's when I went to work for the Rangers full time, and I guess kind of not full time because I have an off season. And so that, to me, what I have now is as perfect to a work-life balance as I can get, especially in this industry.
Yeah. So before I ask you about the Rangers, because I do have a question about that, what's something that you learned from your dad that you brought into what you do now in terms of sort of managing? Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I learned everything from him, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think more than like the logistics or that whole balance and how you do that, far more than that was the way he taught me to build relationships and how important relationships are, not only in your personal life, but in your professional life. And I think that is what has kind of carved this niche out for me within the Rangers organization. What my colleagues around baseball do, they're not all as relationship driven as I am, because being a member of the media, you're not supposed to get too close to the people you cover. There's supposed to be a wall in between there. And I bucked that very early on. And it was frowned upon by some, and I was committed to, carving things out the way that I wanted. And I thought that it benefited, the people who I was reporting for, or, working for, that those relationships benefited that. And that, you do have to be careful not to get too close and cross any lines and all those things. But for me, that relationship building aspect was something that, I learned from my family, and something that I wanted to take into my work.
Yeah. We're going to take a sponsor break, and we'll be right back.
Since 1952, South Texas Children's Home Ministries has focused on healing hearts and sharing hope. Their 9 ministries focus on helping hurting children and families, all regardless of an individual's ability to pay. To find out more, visit www.stchm.org.
So for those that are getting started, or maybe they're not just getting started, they're into their career, one of the things that, not every organization is like the Texas Rangers. And so as you were talking with them, and I know you can't tell us all the inside scoop, but for those that are trying to make decisions like that about what they're going to do with their career, and they're looking for something or a place that will afford them that work-life balance, what are some markers for you that make an organization a place where you can grow as opposed to be consumed?
Well, I think first of all, you have to have the conversations. Like, you can't just expect it to happen. You can't just expect them to come to you and say, "Hey, you want to cut back your hours so you can spend more time with your family?" I mean,
nobody does that.
Right. You have to take the initiative yourself. And so that was something that I did when I went to work for the Rangers. We had those conversations. How many games do you want me to work? How many games do you want me to travel? What kind of commitment are you looking from me in the off season? You have to have those conversations so that it's very clear you're on the same page, because if either party is unhappy, that marriage is not going to work. And it's going to either, it's going to create stress in the workplace, or it's going to create stress at home, or it's going to create stress both places. And so I think that you just have to have those conversations. And if you don't, and also to be willing to adjust. So you can't just have it all your way, and they can't have it all their way, but you have to find middle ground. And if you're not able to find that middle ground, it's unlikely that it's going to provide a stable environment that can sustain long term.
Well, and that conversation that you had with the Rangers, that's not a conversation you could have had when you started.
No.
You had to earn your stripes.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first started, it was like, tell me when to show up, how long to stay, and kick me out the door. And I think it's that way in any profession. In broadcasting, especially television broadcasting, it's, the industry weeds itself out. Because a lot of people, also being stereotypical, they say, "Oh, I want to be on the news," or "I want to do this," or and they don't realize that, like, in order to get to the place where you want to be, you have to start out making $16,000 a year, working 6 to 7 days a week, nights and weekends. And if you're not for an extended period of time, I mean, some people escalate quicker than others, and that's great, but it takes some time. It's a lot like minor league baseball. I mean, you've got to put in that work if you want to make it to the big leagues. And so that for me was hard, because I'm not a patient person, but I wanted this so badly for so long that I was willing to put in that work and to kind of see the process through to where I felt like I was setting myself up for some long-term success.
Yeah. So you mentioned the process and not being patient. That was another question that I was curious about in our first conversation. You talked about baseball being about letting the game come to you and trusting the process. And you just said basically that's not really in your natural wiring to wait for the ball to come to you or let the game come to you. So, do you feel like these are, that this posture, I guess, is more natural for you, or is this something that you are constantly sort of working on, letting the game come to you?
I think the older I've gotten and the more time that I've spent in my job, the easier it is. There was a time, when I first started having kids and then kind of realized the path that my career was taking. I had for example, I did college football sidelines. I wanted to do NFL, but then I quickly realized that Fox's path for me was not to the NFL. It was to the least important game in the Big 12 every weekend. And so I had to accept that was no longer going to be an option. But what it did do is that led me eventually to this, what I call the icing or cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake of my career with the Rangers. And so, I think if you constantly leave your eyes and ears open to what's around you it's good to be focused on a goal, but if you can be focused on a goal but still realize what's going on in your peripheral vision, that allows you to be a little more patient and trust in that, that so-called process.
Yeah. And it sounds like you also have to make sure you don't put blinders on. You're so focused on your goal that these lateral moves that can get you to that goal or to somewhere maybe even better than that goal, if we have our blinders on, we can't see that stuff.
Oh, for sure. And I got asked yesterday, I was talking to a student and she said, was this your dream job growing up? And I was like, absolutely not. College football sidelines, that's what I wanted to be, a sideline reporter. College football was my jam. That's what I wanted to do. But when I went to work for Fox Sports Southwest and started covering, the NBA, NHL, MLB, and I was covering everything, college, high school, everything under the sun. And then very organically and gradually, I started gravitating toward the Rangers organization and toward the game of baseball. And had I been so bent on, staying on the sidelines and all that kind of stuff, whether it be in college or the NFL, I wouldn't have allowed myself to go down this, little side road on my path to where I wanted to be, and then ultimately end up in the perfect spot for me and for my family. Yeah,
and you might have been able to stay on the sidelines, sure, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I chose to give that up. I chose to take things in another direction, and I'm totally at peace with that because I don't feel like I left anything out there. I felt like I felt like I did leave everything out there. I gave it everything I had. That was not the plan that Fox had for me, and I guess ultimately I could have tried with another network or to go a different route, to ultimately end up to that place where I thought I wanted to be. But that wasn't in the end where I wanted to be.
Yeah. We're going to take a 60-second sponsor break, and we'll be right back. High Ground Advisors has a 90-year history of providing investment management and planned giving solutions to churches, faith-based organizations, and charitably minded individuals dedicated to transforming lives. High Ground is trusted by over 450 nonprofit clients, and we're one of them. High Ground has partnered with Baptist Standard for over 70 years by offering a comprehensive charitable giving and investment solutions model, which includes asset management, planned giving education and development, account support services, real estate and minerals management, and expert legal consultation. High Ground and the Baptist Standard share similar values, such as serving those who are called and dedicated to transforming lives and being a trusted caretaker of legacies. They also value good stewardship, helping those who desire to be good stewards of their financial resources to find creative giving solutions to fulfill that calling. They know what they do to protect, strengthen, and grow our mission is ultimately in service to the gospel. To learn more about how High Ground Advisors can partner with you or your organization, visit their website at highgroundadvisors.org. One of the questions that came up in our other conversation, it was about your kids, and you talked about teaching your kids to be good humans, and you said being kind, empathetic, and being aware of their community. And so, especially in, the tenor of our communities these days, we need our kids to learn how to be good human beings. And I'm just curious, I'd like to hear more about what that means for you, being a good human being, and the things that you're trying to teach your kids.
Well, I think the most important thing that I'm trying to do is to expose them to people outside of our bubble. We live in a predominantly white neighborhood. I would say, I guess, upper middle class. They go to a great school where it's just everything's come pretty easily for them. And as parents, you want to do that, and obviously I want to do that for my kids. But I also don't want it. I don't want them to think that it's this way, this is easy, and that we didn't work for this, and that there aren't people outside of this bubble that are struggling in very big ways, and that and that not everything is roses and daffodils and everything's perfect, and yada yada yada. So I try to expose them to different types of situations, whether it be serving meals at a food kitchen, or making blankets for homeless people, or buying a bus pass for a friend that we have who's homeless, and we'll check on her every once in a while and take her a bus pass, or trying to teach them the different trying to teach them that life can be a struggle, and it can be more of a struggle for some, and that instead of just living in our bubble, we should do our best to help those who need some help. And so that's just those are and I try to expose them to things that maybe some parents want to shield their kids from, and I think that there's that natural instinct to shield them from things, but for me it's important to expose them to that, so they know that life isn't like our bubble for everyone.
Yeah. And that leads me to the last question that I was going to ask in our other conversation about your books. We just briefly mentioned your books, and that was something I really wanted to ask you about. So you have two books, and they both involve kids, and so I'm wondering, of all the books, all the stories that you could have written, why those two?
Well, so, reading and books have always been a big part of our family time. And so at night when they were little, we used to all sit around and, read a book in bed and then put them to bed. And when they started getting older and really grasping morals to stories and lessons that these books were teaching, I just thought to myself, how much more powerful would those messages be if I wrote them and then made them and their friends characters in these books. And so the first one is called A Place for Everyone, and it's about just inclusion. It's about diversity and inclusion and how people look different, and then they play in different groups, and it's okay to play in different groups, and it's okay if someone looks different than you. And so that was a message that was really, really important to me, especially early on in my kid's life, to grasp that not everyone looks like you, not everyone thinks like you, and it's okay to have a friend group, but it's also okay to welcome others into that friend group and to explore other friend groups. Let's try to be as friends with as many people as we possibly can. And then with Something Special in the Stands, we found out that one of our dear friends was having a baby with Down syndrome. And I wanted to be able to give my kids a resource to kind of to know what baby Charlotte was going to be, how she was going to be different, but she was going to be special, and to teach them about special needs kids. And it's based on two people who I've gotten to know and become friends with at the ballpark over the years. And one is a girl named Hannah, and she's an usher. She has Down syndrome, and she dances in the stands. She's amazing.
Oh yeah. And
so she's brought me such joy. And so Hannah's in the book also, and a girl named Amber who has severe autism and is developmentally delayed. She's an adult, but she kind of acts like a child at times. And So I wanted to use those two personal relationships to convey to my kids how we can embrace those with special needs and be exposed to them, and know how to, not to be afraid and not to be, skittish around them, that they're, that they might look and act a little different, but, they deserve our love too. And so that was really inspired by baby Charlotte, our friend who was born, and now she's a beautiful little girl. But I just wanted to give them kind of that tool and that resource to help them learn how how to interact and how to accept those friends of ours that have special needs.
Yeah. You may have already given us a clue to this, but I want to ask a little bit of a personal question related to those books. These stories that you wanted to give to your kids, I've got to think that there's a piece of you, your heart is in these books. So where are you in the storyline?
I'm probably just where I am. I mean, just the mom trying to teach, just trying to be a teacher, just trying to raise good kids. They're not going to be perfect. They're not going to do everything right. I just above all else, I tell them all the time, like, I don't care, of course I care about their grades and all that kind of stuff, but I want them to be good humans. Like, I want them to be positive lights. I don't want them to be negative lights. And so I think it's just me wanting so badly for them to be good people. But if I can have someone if I can raise two kids where people are like, man, those are some kind kids, that'll be it,
Yeah. Well, Emily, thank you so much for spending some extra time with us today.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Yeah. It's good to be with you again.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Just because a person follows Jesus doesn't mean that person is perfect. Following Jesus is a lifetime of growing more like Him. Likewise, while there are followers who are more mature than others, who have spent more time growing close to Jesus than other followers, there are no followers of Jesus who are better than others. If you aren't on the way with Jesus, we invite you to check out the Follow Jesus page on the Baptist Standard website at baptiststandard.com/Follow Jesus to learn more about becoming a follower of Him. If you are on the way with Jesus, we hope that this podcast has encouraged you to grow more like Him. I'm Eric Black, editor of the Baptist Standard, and I'm glad you've been with us today.